Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening on the audio, you're listening to my regular YouTube live stream, Ask James, where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. And today, bearing in mind we're in the middle of an international break, I'd certainly welcome non-fantasy football questions, but I reckon there'll still be loads. Anyway, obviously no team news to update you because it's International Week. Although I can tell you that a fire has broke out at Andorra Stadium where England are due to play tomorrow night. So I don't know if that puts the game in doubt, possibly. Could well be moved to another venue, I guess. Let's see who's in the chat. Steve Jones is first. Says, hi James. Might ask a few random questions today as there's not much FPL related stuff to ask this week. Please do, mate. What other sports are you a fan of besides football, boxing? Boxing and F1 for me. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of any other particular sport. If there's a big boxing match and it's at a sensible time, listen to me. Big boxing fight and it's a sensible time, as per AJ a couple of weeks ago, I'll tend to watch it. Will I be watching Wilder and Fury at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it's due to be? No, probably not, although I'd like to watch it. F1, I like the first lap. That's decent. Harry loves it. Even Harry's getting bored after a couple of laps now, though. That's my boy who's nearly 3. Like a bit of snooker, personally, but I wouldn't watch anything other than the Worlds. Similar applies to darts, actually. I don't mind watching a bit of cricket if it's one-day stuff or kind of flicking on and off if it's the Ashes, for example. But there aren't any other sports that I'm particularly into or go out of my way to watch. Definitely not, Steve. Lewis James says, hi James, is Planet FPL your full-time job yet? Hope your afternoon with the little man was good. Yes, thank you. And I should say for those on YouTube of not following my Twitter account, yes, I should have done this stream a little bit earlier today, but I took my little boy out and was having a good time, so we stayed out longer. Simple as that, actually. And that's why for the audio listeners, the audio's coming out a bit later for you than normal as well. Is this my full-time job? Yes, it is now. I'm very, very lucky to be employed by my podcast partner doing this. There are not enough of that hours in the day for me to do the content that I do if I wasn't full-time. I'm very lucky, Lewis. Yes, I am doing this full-time. Nikki Kassam says, yo, right, so 3 great feasible signings for the Newcastle United board. 1 manager and 2 players. Go. So, the thing is, it's all well and good saying, get Conte, get Zidane. That's not the manager that Newcastle want right now, in my opinion, because they've got too many bad footballers, and that's going to create some frustrations. What they want is an up-and-coming manager who in the media, I think, can turn Newcastle from being a side that's going to fight for relegation to being a side over the next couple of years can stabilise towards being to one that in the first instance will try and qualify for Europa League placings. And for me, that's someone who knows the league well. So someone like Graham Potter at Brighton, someone like Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, if he became available. I think that's the right type of profile of manager that Newcastle should be looking at in the first instance. Then once they hit that kind of Europa League spot and want to be pushing on to challenge for the title and stuff like that, you go again. Harsh reality of life, but that's what I think is probably right for Newcastle. In terms of players, similar. The best thing they can do is go and get the best young up-and-coming talent, people who are on the fringes, say, of the England squad. So, I don't know, perhaps kind of pillaging people from the bottom half of the league, actually kind of teams that are in and around Newcastle at the moment. So, doesn't have to be English players. I mean, they're talking about players like maybe like Ismail Assar at Watford, Patrick White-McNeil at Burnley, Eberechi Eze at Crystal Palace once he's back fit. I think in the immediate, these are the right type of kind of young, hungry players that Newcastle should be going out and buying. If you just want to go and buy world-class players who are like 34, 35, that's not the right solution. The best thing to do in the first instance is to build it up and also have the resale value, because they will have to stay within some sort of financial fair play limits, and probably at some point they will probably want to move on from the likes of Dwight McNeil and Ismail Assar, similar to the kind of manager trend that I'm talking about. So I think these are the sort of players that they should go for, who will have good resale value for them. Would have to be a little bit careful though, is the salary, right? If you get someone like Dwight McNeil in the door and start offering him 500 grand a week, he's going to be very difficult to sell. So you have to be a little bit careful. BC6 says, hi James, curious as to what your job was before Planet FPL became a full-time occupation. Love the pods. Well, BC6 knows that I'm doing it full-time. I worked for Suggs company. It was a packaging company. Used to sell carrier bags. I used to help people with their branding on their packaging. Jacob NH says, hi James, if you were on wildcard now, which goalkeeper do you think you'd go with? It would have been Ramsdale for me. I'd possibly give that a miss now that he's 4.6. And I think once we get beyond the Chelsea game, David Raya's got a really good run of fixtures from game week 9 to 16. And that's probably where I'd go, actually. I'd go David Raya, and I would go Ben Foster as backup. 4.0, the most likely to play 4.0 at the moment, though it would come as no surprise to me if Daniel Backman nicks his spot back. But actually, I mean, looking at Raya and Foster's fixtures, that period that I'm talking about up to sort of game week 16, you would never pick Foster over Raya. Ever, I don't think. There isn't a week just kind of glancing at them. Nope, you'd go Raya almost every week. Really straightforward choice. Jacob NH says, sorry, that's the question I've just done. Andras Yamesk says, afternoon James, if you were on wildcard, what would your back five be? Yay, FPL question. Let's make this short and sweet. Trent if fit, Cancelo, Azpilicueta, Rudiger, Livramento. I would be going with a strong back four and one cheapie. RW Chris 1983. Hi James, do you think the Newcastle news makes Son a better or worse potential captain pick for game week 8? Worse because of the feel good factor lifting the team, or better as Bruce is the dead man walking? Don't particularly think it makes any difference. Is Heung-min Son really a better captaincy choice in game week 8 than Mo Salah away to Watford? He's not, is he? Let's be real about it. If anything, you would think the atmosphere is going to be very different around St James's Park. There's a good chance Steve Bruce will be gone, actually, by the time the game comes around. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So if anything, it would make him worse, but I don't think it particularly makes a difference. Still probably going to be the same 22 players on the pitch, just a little bit more of an intense atmosphere, I think, from a Newcastle perspective. Steve Jones says, how many hours in a week would you say you invest into Planet FPL? Oh my God. All things considered, research, recording pods, watching games, etc., including watching games. Fuck, man. I don't want to come off with a really stupid kind of overestimate here, but I think it would be fair to say we're talking at a minimum 10 hours a day on average across a whole week. So I think 70 hours is a fair estimate if you're including the watching the games as well. In fact, if you include them watching the games, we're possibly going higher towards sort of 75, 80 maybe. Don't feel sorry for me. BC6 says, given that Man City recently got out of financial fair play penalties, do you think they will be seriously considered, but clubs such as City, Newcastle, Chelsea moving forward? Sorry, I don't understand the question. Given that Man City recently got out of FFP penalties, do you think they will be seriously considered, but clubs such as Newcastle, Chelsea moving forward? I'm really sorry, mate. I don't understand what question you're trying to ask there. I can only speculate that you're asking about FFP and if it's likely to affect clubs coming up. It's kind of loosened a little bit at the moment because of COVID, but you know, we've seen kind of Barcelona through La Liga been kind of really restricted to kind of 7th, 8th biggest budget within La Liga and their wage structure at the moment. Newcastle, we're going to talk about Newcastle in real detail on Tuesday, so don't want to too much now because it's fairly certain we're going to do a whole podcast on them for the People's Poll on Tuesday. But they'll have money to play with. At the moment, they can't just go and spend 500 million in January. Like, genuinely, that's clear. And actually, it's not the right thing for them to do in any case. So, look, they've got money to spend. Clearly, they can clear any problems. One thing Mike Ashley has left them with is in actually a very sensible financial fair play setting where they're not got to kind of pay back debts or anything. So, like, they can go straight in and spend some money in January. Just, they can't go mental. But could Newcastle spend like 100 million in January? Actually, the answer is yes. In terms of FFP's future, obviously Man City getting the CAS appeal overturned certainly doesn't strengthen UEFA's kind of remit for being strict on it. I think it's something really to follow. Plus, Obviously, the fact that the clubs tried to break away for the Super League shows some sort of power that they don't want to be within UEFA's restrictions. It could well be that it gets abolished, but I suspect the clubs that want to, so we're talking like the Madrids, the Barças, and actually, clubs like Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, for example, who kind of want to stay within a kind of financial, I wouldn't say level with the likes of City, Chelsea, PSG, and possibly in the near future Newcastle as well. They're not going to want, most people are not going to want FFP completely abolished, I don't think, because some of them other clubs, say like Liverpool, can make a lot more in terms of revenue, endorsements, sponsorship, worldwide selling of shirts, etc., in comparison to some of these other clubs. So there's plenty that will be against. Obviously, for the likes of the clubs that I've mentioned, they'll want to get rid of it. It's fairly clear. Definitely a story to keep an eye on over the next year or so. My friend Andy, Let's Talk FPL, is in, says, where's the best place to have a drink in London? Winky eye. Not where we're drinking tomorrow, Andy, although it's a very decent enough venue. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, my friend. Jamie Anthony says, hi James, who is current favourite player to watch in the Prem? Not Spurs. Favourite player to watch in the Prem? For me, and he's not fully fit at the moment, but it would still be Kevin De Bruyne. Genius. There's not anything he can't do. Works hard. He's got everything in his locker. Right foot, left foot. Best all-round player, in my opinion. So Kevin De Bruyne, for very different reasons. I think N'Golo Kante is well worth a mention. Probably for very different reasons, those two players I would put top. Triple Trapped In says, hi James, I've booked in my free transfer and have 1 million in the bank. Do you think it would be worth upgrading any of Dennis, Gilmore or Shaw for a -4? Well, the thing is, my friend, what are you upgrading to? So if you're upgrading Gilmore to, I don't know, Damari Gray, for example, Abdullah Decore, you might look at it. You don't have to judge it on the 1 week. Judge it over a longer period and go, yep, of course, it's going to be worth it. Similar with Luke Shaw. Like, to be honest, if you're taking Luke Shaw out for a -4, you need a clean sheet and a little bit more for it to be worth it if it's based on just 1 game week. If you're basing it on, I'm definitely selling Luke Shaw anyway, I want to judge this over the process of 5-6 weeks, then fine, move him out for City player, Chelsea player. I think if I was moving out Shaw, it would be a Chelsea player this week, because if it's a City player, they might not even play. There's always that risk. But generally speaking, if you're judging it on the immediate, no. I mean, Luke Shaw will play at Leicester if he's fit, isn't he? Is it impossible that Luke Shaw could keep a clean sheet or get an attack in return? Of course it isn't. So, generally speaking, no, it's probably not worth it. Gilmore's obviously out the Norwich team at the moment. Dennis, you wouldn't expect anything from, bar a 2-pointer. But generally speaking, no, it's probably not worth it. Jamie Anthony is telling Andy the Beehive, obviously. It's where we watch Spurs game. Jamie, we should have a beer in there at some point, mate. Jahan Ahmed says, what will it take for Spurs to get back in the UEFA Champions League? Tough to see how they can get in the top 4 ahead of City, Chelsea, United, Liverpool, plus with the emergence of Newcastle in the coming years. Well, of course. And the same applies to Arsenal and Everton and West Ham and Leeds if they want to be that team, and Leicester. The same applies to a lot of the teams. Of course, it's going to be very, very difficult. I think the very, very best route for Tottenham to take is the route that I've advised for Newcastle to take. And I think in Tottenham's case, it's very different. In fact, you come down lower. It's go and identify the best talent in the Championship. I've said this so many times. This is how Tottenham got there in the first place. How we began to grow was going and buying Paul Robinson, Danny Rose, Michael Dawson, Cole Walker, Michael Carrick, Jermaine Defoe. We bought them all for peanuts, basically. And nearly all of them from Championship clubs who all went on to become regular internationals for England. And that's what Tottenham need to go back and identify. I don't know why we've stopped buying the best young English kids outside the Premier League, because we were notorious for it in pretty much between 2005 all the way up to even Pochettino's kind of first couple of years. Eric Dyer, admittedly not from a Championship side, but English, obviously from Sporting Lisbon. £4 million bought for. following January. Dele Alli, £5 million from Milton Keynes. Why have Tottenham stopped doing that? I mean, that's the best chance you've got, because you cannot compete with these teams anymore from a financial. There's no expectation to do it at the moment. Jahan, I think that it's clearly it's going to take quite a while, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. Chelsea have shown before they can go from first to 10th to first over the space of 3 years, and you've got to take advantage when something like that happens. But yeah, of course, it's looking more and more difficult. I think where we will land eventually, by the way, I think we will eventually land in a place where 6 English teams will go in the Champions League. And I don't think that will happen for a while. I think we're talking 6-7 years, possibly longer. But I think eventually the sheer wealth of what's going on in the Premier League is eventually, I think it's going to necessitate that there's real knocking on the door. Because you're looking at, I don't know the latest figures, but I think it's fair to assume that there's probably 9 English clubs in the top 20 richest in the world at the moment. So, you know, those on the fringes, the likes of Tottenham, Arsenal, are going to be knocking on the door. So, as I said, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually it becomes a top 6 from England that goes in the Champions League. Esan says, who are your top 10 Prem players of all time in order? You're putting me on the spot there, my friend. You're putting me on the spot to put 10 in order and not have any prep for thinking of that. Best player for me, I'm going to say Thierry Henry. I think he goes in there. While we're on the subject of Arsenal, I personally think Patrick Vieira would probably be in there. Ryan Giggs, off-field misdemeanors aside, needs to go in there. I would put Wayne Rooney in there. I think Ronaldo should go in there. Alan Shearer has to go in there somewhere. I think John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba are all reasonable shouts. So too Gianfranco Zola actually as well. David Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, Sergio Aguero, Vincent Kompany. It's very difficult to... I mean, Luis Suarez is an incredible period for Liverpool. Mo Salah now. Very difficult off the spot to put them 10 in order. But I would say Henry first, in all honesty, for me. I mean, N'Golo Kante, I haven't mentioned, another one. Jamie Vardy, possibly even. So many players. I haven't even mentioned any Tottenham players. There's probably a reason why, actually. But then if you ask that question by the end, Hassan, it could be that Harry Kane should probably be in those top 10. So, Joe Finney Batter says, evening James, wildcard tinkering. Oh, you should know better, mate. Thoughts on going Adam Armstrong over Tony for 3 game weeks, or just get Tony in now? We already have Mbuemo. Cheers. I think I'd look at that differently, Joe. Because say if you're going Armstrong for 3, right? You've got Leeds at home, Burnley at home, Watford away. Then you've got Villa at home, Norwich away. If you're actually going for 3, why not go for 5? I think I'd look at it differently and go, realistically, I wouldn't be desperate to have Tony this week with Chelsea at home. I would have no problem buying him for Leicester at home. But if something comes up and you have to hold off for another week, that's also okay. So I'd be looking for someone with a really good 1 fixture and a 2nd fixture that was acceptable. So I think the one that would stand out for 1 week punt, actually, Neil Maupay of Brighton. You don't want Maupay the following week. So if you need to think the 2 weeks together, I think with the uplift of the team, Alan Saint-Maximin would be worth a shout. Really short term, Tottenham at home and then Crystal Palace away. With Saint-Maximin, it does make me feel more like, yeah, should I just go with Tony, to be honest. But there aren't too many others in and around that value who have got a brilliant 2 games together. I'd maybe put Ollie Watkins in there. Wolves at home. Then Arsenal away is not so great. But obviously, look, if you can't force the transfer, that's okay. Then it becomes more obvious to make the move, I think. So, I think if I was... what I would do, I think, if I was on wildcard, you need to make sure you're really happy with the rest of the team, which means you can't really take chances on players that are doubts, such as Trent. So you might be better off actually going, look, I'm going to go double Chelsea. I'm going to go without Trent for 3 or 4 weeks or so. But I think if I was going for 1 week, I'd possibly chance Maupay and away to Norwich, and then know he was coming out immediately. That would be my take. Armstrong, I always had it in my mind that I'd go and buy him this week, as and when it comes around, but I'm not comfortable with that at the moment because one goal in their last 4, and that's a penalty. So, and Ward-Prowse creativity obviously going to be missing for the next 2 as well. So not so keen on that. I think if it was me, I'd probably just go Tony, mate. JFPL says, evening James, as a Spurs fan, what's your best 11 of Tottenham players that you've seen live? And can you see any of the current squad, ex Kane, getting in there in the near future? I'm not going to answer that. There's 2 reasons why I'm going to answer that. 1, I've answered it many times before. 2, I'm guesting on Ray Qureshi's show on Monday night, which I think is going to go out later next week. And we are going to talk about my all-time Tottenham 11 in a bit more detail. So keep an eye out for that. I'll obviously share that through my social media channels. In terms of a player that's not in there, who I think all could be and change my mind over the next couple of years, I would say Heung-min Son would obviously definitely be the standout. He's borderline now. He's borderline getting in it, actually. So Sonny can really lock it down in the next couple of years and kind of convince me. I won't spoil it for you by saying the player that's in instead of him at the moment. Simda here says, hi James, best 5 million defender. I am going to say Kieran Tierney of Arsenal, mate. Failing that, I believe Andreas Christensen's still same price, isn't he? Christensen, I imagine, probably plays at Brentford. Then it's week-to-week gamble, isn't it? He's never got attacking returns in him, Christensen. I would rather have Tierney, of which I do. By the way, it doesn't mean I won't add Christensen, depending on how my makeup of my squad looks this time next week. It might be that Christensen's a reasonable short-term get for me. Tammy Gord said, hey James, what are your thoughts on the Newcastle takeover? Straight to the point question, isn't it? Again, I'm not going to talk about it too much because we're going to do a whole podcast on it next week. What I will say is there's a lot of anger around at the moment, and I understand that. It feels to me that it's impossible to make a comment on it at the moment without upsetting someone, and I understand why. Because I understand the community that are obviously so against the human rights stuff of Saudi Arabia, etc. I completely get it. That those people are well entitled to be angry. I also get the complete joy in Newcastle fans at the moment, and I'm happy for them that they are happy. And I think their celebration is as much about Mike Ashley going as it is about the fact that they're now the richest football club in the world. I genuinely, Newcastle fans, and this is again, it's a comment that will upset someone, have suffered for a long time over the last kind of 15 years or so, however long Ashley's been there. Now it's all relative, right? Because when we say suffered, people will instantly go, well, what about berries and stuff like that? Listen, no one's forgotten about them, at least not someone like me, who's obviously, we've done the detail on clubs like that. But relative for Newcastle fans have suffered over the last 15 years. They believe they've got their football club back. Now, the flip against that is you could say, well, actually, they've never been further away because they're now owned by a state. So, we're going to do the detail. My opinion on it is that it's obviously great for Newcastle and their fans in terms of what they're going to be. Am I comfortable with it? No. But the majority of owners in the Premier League have also got their hands dirty, let's say, right? Let's not pretend, any Chelsea fan suddenly is going to be down the necks of Newcastle fans saying it's blood money and stuff like that. Yeah, yours is the same. Now, of course, in Abramovich's case, are we saying literal blood money? Maybe not, whereas Newcastle's is perhaps literal blood money. So again, almost no matter what you say about this, there is a comeback in terms of pros, cons, why people are happy, why people are unhappy, and there's so much to cover. And that's why we're going to try and unravel it properly in a full podcast on Tuesday. My personal opinion is I'm not comfortable with it, is what I would say, and that's nothing to do with my support of Tottenham. My friends are Newcastle fans and I'm quite happy with them. I'm not overly comfortable with the people that are now running their football club, and I think that's fairly clear to see for everybody. From a Tottenham fan perspective, of course it doesn't make things any easier for us. we're pretty fucked anyway. So it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. It's one more team to kind of jump the ladder possibly in 4 or 5 years' time or whatever. But I think it's right for people not to feel comfortable. I also think it's absolutely okay for Newcastle fans to be delirious and extremely happy at the moment. Murray D says, afternoon James, first time I made it live due to the later start time. Welcome. Non-FPL related question here. You can come again. Do you know what club did Harry Kane make his debut against? Oh, for Tottenham. I want to say it was Hearts. I think that's right. Pop it in so I can check. But I think Harry Kane's Tottenham debut, I want to say, was against Hearts in a UEFA Cup / Europa League qualifier. I think that's correct. Esan says, who do you think will win the Nations League final, France or Spain? I caught a little bit at the end of the Spain game the other night. Obviously, Italy were down to 10 men, and they give it a real good go to try and get the game to extra time, actually. I think Spain are purring under Luis Enrique. France, obviously, have got the experience and the quality. Wouldn't be surprised if it went all the way to penalties. But I'll go with Spain, actually. I think they're going to be a very strong contender in 2022, actually, under Luis Enrique. I think they're growing. They're kind of ready to peak next year, actually. I'm second-guessing that Harry Kane question now. I'm sure that's right against Hearts. I need to know, Murray. Tell me. Kumar said, enjoy your show. Son or Foden on my wildcard. Already have 2 Man City defenders. Well, it's an interesting one because there's a big disparity in money between the two. So if I say Foden, what are you doing with the rest of the money? Just leaving it? What's the plan? I presume there's a knock-on impact to that. If you're just asking me between Son or Foden, I'm going to say Son, mate. The dad course. Afternoon, James. Hope you're well, mate. When's the next meet up? Simple goal, Dave. It's tomorrow, Dave. It's a bit of a private one, but mainly for our patrons, actually. Possibly November. I wouldn't rule it out. If not, there'll definitely be something in early December, I would have thought, in terms of, I don't think we're probably quite at the stage yet with COVID and the moving situation in terms of it's getting colder outside and we need to be conscious. I don't think we're quite at the point of looking at doing a live show, i.e. a live podcast as yet. But meetups, yes, tentatively. I think we all need to be conscious that the situation could change in the next couple of months. FPL Finding Glory, Newcastle Takeover. At what cost? I feel uncomfortable about it. Would you consider a pod on it? Yes, we're going to do it on Tuesday, mate. Or is it a little too political? No, we'll do it. We don't give a shit. Understand if so. To be honest, we do have to be a little bit careful with what we say, but we'll do it. Hope you're good. Looking forward to game week 8. We'll do it. The other thing is, just one final point on that as well. I've seen a lot of, if this happened to my club, I wouldn't support them anymore. And I get that. And that's fine. All I can tell you is, and we've had this discussion with Johnny Pringle about Man City in the past, because of where some of their money's come from and stuff. If these people had taken over Tottenham, I wouldn't stop supporting Tottenham. I can't. I mean, would I have been outside White Hart Lane celebrating yesterday and stuff? No, I don't think I would. But then I can understand. I think from a Newcastle perspective, it was much about Mike Ashley going. They know they're getting rid of Bruce now, etc. Even if it's not for a month or so, they know they're getting rid of him. They feel like they're getting their football club, even if retrospectively not exactly. It's even further away, as I've already said. But you can't. I couldn't take that. I go to Spurs every week and have done for 30 years. I can't suddenly change that. I've had people manage my football team who I fucking hate, and don't get me wrong, none of them are murderers and stuff. But you can't change it. What do? Do you stop? I wouldn't find it that easy. And I can understand that some people morally are going to say no. They really, really are. I can get that. I know, and we'll speak about this on Tuesday's podcast, a statement that's been made this afternoon from Pride of United, which is Newcastle United's LGBT group. And they're supporting it, although it's go and find a statement. It's not great. The statement doesn't look good. So they're accepting it. Others won't, and I completely get that. But if it had been Tottenham, for example, like, I'm not going to sit here and say to you, Newcastle fans should stop supporting their club. Like, in my opinion, it's a nonsense. Like, emotionally, you're too far invested. That can't stop. Do you start supporting that club as new? Probably not. But guess what? If Newcastle become very successful, they will get a load of worldwide supporters who are not going to give a shit about where the money's coming from into that football club. They'll just go, oh, I'm going to support them. They're the best team in the world. I wouldn't be able to stop supporting Spurs. Would I like it? No. Would I feel comfortable talking about it? No. Would I feel comfortable going and supporting 11 people on the pitch every week? Yes, it's not their fault. That's where I'd be at. Steve Jones says, assuming Harry Kane has another consistent season, what sort of price do you think Levy will want next summer? Consider it will then be 2 years left on his deal. The same. I think you'll want the same, Steve. He will want... It's been suggested that he probably wouldn't have accepted 150 million, which is why City never bothered going beyond 100 million. I guess next year, with 2 years left on the contract, it's possible that he would probably lower that demands and they'd probably find a middle ground of 130 or so. But then you'd have to ask, do City then want to pay that money this time next year when he's a year old? I think it might be 29 next summer. Then there's literal no resale value if it goes wrong. You are stuck with the player if he suddenly suffers bad injuries and completely, I mean, he's not quick anyway, but completely loses all pace, for example. So that would be City's decision. I don't see where anybody else would be interested with him. I presume Ronaldo's still going to be at Manchester United next year, so it rules them out. Chelsea will have Lukaku, rules them out. So it's only City, or possibly, I guess, maybe Bayern Munich if Lewandowski left. Can't see any other club that you could say would buy Harry Kane next summer now. It would only be City or possibly Bayern Munich. Or, of course, Newcastle. I guess we should start considering them in that sort of conversation. But I think in terms of actually winning trophies, Newcastle's going to be a longer term process. And to be honest, as I said, Harry Kane's not the right sort of buyer for them unless they are adamant they've got to have it immediately. But all the noises are that no, it's a very long term project for Newcastle. So yes, possibly 130 million. I don't know if anyone would offer that next year, mate. Not convinced at all. And there's the emotional pull, of course, of the players come through the academy. He never cost Tottenham anything from that perspective in the first place. There is a suggestion that Daniel Levy will just literally say no. Just keep saying no. And in the belief that when he gets into final year of the contract, he'll be able to offer Kane more money than anybody else will at that stage of his career. There is a suggestion of that. Daniel Donnelly, not that nobody else can offer more, nobody else will offer more is what I should say, is a possibility. Daniel Donnelly says, hi James, 2 random questions. Prediction on the Fury and Wilder fight. I'm no boxing expert at all. I'm not even an FPL expert, but it's difficult to look beyond Tyson Fury. I saw a bit of the press conference the other day and Fury looks ready, right? I'd be surprised if he didn't win. And how many years do you think it will take for Newcastle to break to the top 4? So Man City got their money right at the end of the transfer window of 2008, and you might remember they bought Robinho on the final day. Now at that point it really was a big 4. There was United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal. They were basically the top 4 for all of the noughties, basically, bar, I want to say, Everton in 2005 and a little bit of Leeds right at the start, and actually a little bit of Newcastle right at the start of that decade. Other than that, they were the big 4. They were very clear at that point in time, so it wasn't easy to break that monopoly. Liverpool had a very, very bad 2010 and then had a really kind of bad early 2010s decade, which rather opened the door unexpectedly for someone to punch through the ceiling when United, Chelsea, Arsenal still stayed at that level. Arsenal dropped off a little bit. Liverpool dropped off a little bit. So it needs that. It needs someone to drop off. City first got in 3 years after that transfer window, so 2011. I think we can compare Newcastle and when they bought compared to Manchester City and say 3 years. So I think from there we're saying 23, 24 is probably, depending on what they do in the next 4 or 5 transfer windows, probably the first possible, I would say. Because as well, the rest of this league is much more competitive. The big four then, when City got the money, were well clear. Well clear of the teams of kind of, Everton's, Tottenham's, Villas and stuff like that. They were well clear. Now, those clubs are better, in my opinion, than what they were 12 years ago. So you've got to get past the Tottenhams, the Villas, the Arsenals, Evertons, Leicesters, West Ham. You've got to get beyond them first. And that's a tougher task than it would have been back then, because as soon as City got the money, they were basically already people going, they could finish fifth like straight away. Obviously in 09-10, obviously people might remember Peter Crouch's goal at the Etihad. They could have finished fourth that year, and again it ended up being City and Tottenham competing because Liverpool had an alarming drop off in the 09-10 season. I want to say they finished seventh or so. I think they finished below Aston Villa as well. So I think 23-24 is the earliest we could expect. I think that might even be a little bit early this time round, actually, because I said all the clubs chasing beyond. But I think then for 24-25, yeah. I mean, that's a solid period to now have an expectation of finishing fourth in the league. I don't think the expectation to finish fourth in the league. I think the expectation for these guys will be to win the league. Alistair Coper says, hey mate, on wildcard at the moment, would you go Tony and Laporte, another 5.7 defender, or Hwang and Diaz as Piliquet? I'd go the Tony option, mate. Theodore says, Eddie Howe seems ideal for Newcastle. Well, I'd throw back and say, why? Why? What experience has he got of managing a Premier League team in the top half of this league? And okay, it's fair enough, you can say Potter, but actually the Eddie Howe teams at Bournemouth, the one thing they never stopped doing was conceding goals. Even when they were after, they always conceded goals. Graham Potter has shown he can play a number of different ways. I would be surprised if Eddie Howe was given the Newcastle job personally. FPL Dougal says, yo, Jimbo, hope all is well. Since this is your full-time job, do you get FPL fatigue or do you still enjoy it regularly? The only time I get fatigue, mate, is when people ask me the same shit questions on these YouTube streams. Otherwise, I enjoy it. Sometimes I watch games and I think, I can't be bothered with this, which I did a lot last year. But I'm not watching all the games this year because it just became excessive. I was recording games and watching them at like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not doing that stuff this year. It's too much. But as I've said previously, I'm very lucky. I enjoy 90% of what I do, and I realise majority of people don't enjoy 90% of what they do in their work life. So I cannot complain. There are some times where I think I can't be bothered with this today, but then I think we all feel like that normally. I think that's fairly normal, and I feel motivated because I take pride in what we do, right? It's not the sort of job where public eye is wrong, but if I turn up for a podcast and can't be bothered, you'll notice. So sometimes I might not want to do something, but I still do it and will give it my best. Chris A says, howdy James, I have had Vardy since, plus just on Dougal, I don't care enough about FPL is part of the point as well. So I don't think I don't get stressed about what am I doing with my team. Well, I tend to make, right, when am I going to make the decision? Fine, we make the decision, we go. And that's it. Chris A says, howdy James, I have had Vardy since game week 1. Well done. My wildcard team has him and Lukaku, Salah and Son, but at the expense of Trent. Do you think the Vardy shout is worth sticking with? I'm struggling to let him go. I get why you're struggling to let him go. He's done well for you. I did some real tactical detail on how Manchester United are suffering on counter-attacks at the moment, and I would suggest that Manchester United at home is not a bad fixture for Jamie Vardy specifically. And it's Brentford away, that's tougher. Honestly, it's tougher for him to find the space. Doesn't mean he'll score against Man United and won't score against Brentford. Of course not. That's daft logic. I'm just saying in terms of Vardy trying to get space, he's more likely to get it against United than Brentford. Arsenal we might actually find difficult. Leeds away could be fun. Chelsea at home will be difficult. Then they have a nice run of fixtures. I don't mind if you want to keep him, particularly if you've got value built. Although I think he's at the same price as he was at the start. Personally, if I was wildcarding, I wouldn't have him. But then I don't have that pull of, hey, I've had the top goal scorer in the league. Personally, I'd go without. But I would look at it and know that obviously you can come down to a 7, 6.5 forward at any point. move your 4.5 defender up to Trent. Yeah, there's ways around this for you to manoeuvre that. You're not stuck forever. And I can certainly see if Trent is still doubtful for game week 8, I can certainly see why you would want to go with Vardy. Josh Hinchcliffe says, hi James, who would be your top 3 members of the current England squad to have at Tottenham? Cheers. What, like, irrespective of whether they'd want to come or not? Because I don't imagine there's anybody in the England squad who would want to play for Tottenham at the moment, including the captain. But if I can just have anyone just for the sake of it, okay. I would take John Stones. I would take Jack Grealish. And I would take Phil Foden, actually, I think those 3. And if I had to name a 4th, do you know what? Arguably, I'd maybe say Declan Rice, which is a bias on Tottenham's desperate need for a good player in that position. FTLOL podcast says, hi James, who is your favourites for next year's World Cup? Oh, I've never looked at the odds or anything, mate. But I've spoke about Spain, and I think they might be very strong, actually. I'm going to say Spain. 9 Tank 7, Whisper Gold or Yorkie Biscuit and Raisin. Oh, Whisper Gold, mate. Sickly nice. But I don't mind a normal Whisper either, to be honest. FPL Glasto says, evening, mate. Gonna guess you will have covered all I wanted to know by now. Just saying hi. Hi, mate. Amber Redmond says, if I gave you a list of all your patrons, how many could you match to the team they support? Oh my God. Well, the thing is, Amber, there's some patrons who are just completely anonymous, and I've never had a conversation with. Like, I've sent them messages and they haven't responded and stuff, but they're supporting the show. So I have no clue. But I would say 50% I could do, I think. Quite comfortably. Cherie MC says, hi James. I'd love to see how you're going to get that list, by the way. Cherie MC says, hi James, do you think another $1 billion owner in the Premier League makes it more or less likely a Super League around the corner? Okay. Point on this. We are the Super League. The Premier League is the Super League. Honestly. Like, if you're saying to me Champions League this year, I think there are 5 teams who can win it, 3 are English. Is my opinion. I think Paris Saint-Germain will probably piss it up the wall, and Bayern Munich will be a real legitimate threat. And I'd be surprised if anybody else won it, personally. When I say anybody else, I mean bar the English teams. It's difficult to see United win at the moment, but at the end of the day, it is still a cup competition. City, Liverpool and Chelsea have to be amongst the favourites to win that competition. And this is why, to go back to an earlier point I made, Sheree, I can visualise that in the long-term future, we will have 6 English teams in the Champions League. I can see that. And it will be Arsenal and Tottenham, just like it was 10 years ago, fighting it out for 6th every year. Lewis James says, I was guessing it was your full-time job with the amount of hours you put in, but I'd never heard it come up in any pods. Lewis, you don't listen to enough Planet FPL content. You've been caught. Mohammed says, hi, James. How are you? I'm very well, thank you. Good to see you. Last week's idea that Spurs need a wild card was a classic. Love your work. Thank you. Yeah. we would... If Tottenham were an FPL team, you'd definitely be on wildcard. No doubt about it. Sage says, I already have Cancelo, Rudiger, Salah and Lukaku. Does it make sense to wildcard? Thanks for the content. I haven't got a clue, mate, because you've got 11 other players and I don't know what they look like. It's the reality. You're judging them whether you should wildcard or not based on 4 players. Okay, you can keep them 4 players. Do you want to get 11 different players in? If you do, the answer might be yes. All Stars Club says, who do you think are the favourites going into next FIFA World Cup? Oh, just covered that. Jovial said, is Newcastle United signing Kylian Mbappe in January transfer window? No, mate, that's not going to happen. Honestly, it's not going to happen. Daniel Garza Rayner, hi James, hope you're doing well. I'm really struggling to decide which 2 of these 3 to start this game week. I mean, it's a week away. Don't, please, when you have something like this, don't spend too much time thinking about it. You spend all week thinking about something, and then someone in your squad might get injured and you end up playing them all anyway. For your benefit, you've got Gray at home to West Ham, definitely plays. Livramento at home to Leeds, Hwang away to Villa. Personally, I'd leave Livramento out, but please don't spend too much time thinking about it. Kieran Gallagher says, will Troy Parrott make the breakthrough at Spurs? I think no, probably. Although I heard he's been doing better at Milton Keynes than he did at Ipswich last year. He's got ability. There's concerns about some off-field stuff. I saw him in Barcelona for Tottenham playing the mini Nou Camp in a game we won 2-0 the night before we drew there to get out of the group stage. And he was fantastic. He holds the ball up so well. He's a good link player. He's a good finisher. He's got all the attributes to be a really good centre forward. It's up to Troy. And I think what doesn't help Troy is the development of Dane Scarlett. Dane Scarlett's 17. He's on the bench for Tottenham every week. And Parrott never got into that position to be a regular on the bench. So it's up to Troy. He's got the ability. Troy Parrott is, if he knuckles down, has the ability to be a centre forward for Tottenham, and so does Dane Scarlett. They are two top talents. I suspect Scarlett will be the better player, and that will also block Parrott. Nicola Torco says, hi James, hope you're doing well, mate. Thanks for always keeping up with the stream, even before a non-FPL weekend. Got a movie suggestion for the weekend for us then? Yeah, go and watch the Bond film, mate. No, I haven't seen it yet, but go and see the Bond film. Dally Paul says, James, would you have Antonio and Jimenez and Ronaldo, or Ronaldo and Lukaku with 4.5 million sub? Like, I literally hate this question, mate. No offence. So what you got instead? So it's not Ronaldo and Lukaku with 4.5. Who's the midfielder instead? So if you just ask me, would I prefer? Well, I prefer the front three, mate. I don't think that generally. Just I would recommend listening to the FPL Experiment podcast, which is on my timeline. I guested on them and for a short period the other night, and we spoke about looking ahead with captaincy. There is no need to have Lukaku and Ronaldo, honestly. And over the short term, it's Lukaku, then it's go back to Ronaldo. There's possibly even a case to have Harry Kane for a little bit in the middle. It's so not necessary to have Lukaku and Ronaldo. We got Mo Salah as well. Or have you not got Mo Salah? I'm betting you've got Mo Salah. Alfredo Demetrius says, hi bro, are you free to come for shopping with me tomorrow morning in Wood Green? Okay. What is it with me? Last week, gym. At least I got a specific... I mean, I kind of feel... I think I feel safer around other people meeting you to go shopping rather than just meeting someone in the gym. No, I'm not free to go shopping in Wood Green tomorrow, but thanks for the offer. I'm going on the beers with my patrons tomorrow. Brendan Davis says, good afternoon. Has Sky taken over as your favourite FPL game, or fantasy game? It has for me, as it brings so many more types of players into play. Cheers. Yes, Sky Fantasy Football is my favourite fantasy football game because it's actually winnable. Whereas we all play... I don't enter any FPL cash leagues, so it's probably part of the reason that I'm not that fussed about it. It's basically nearly impossible to win. I realise someone's going to win it. But it's basically impossible. It's what we fight for. So at the end of my aim is top 20k. That would be my aim, right? Beat my personal best. Finish top 20k. And at the end of the season finishes, and I've either finished 15k, or you put an extra zero on the end, and I finished 150k. And actually, what difference does it make to my life? None. Literally makes no difference to my life at all. Sky Fantasy Football genuinely is winnable for almost anybody, as long as you're prepared to plan. Cherie says, are there not spending limits in Premier League? What are arguments for and against salary caps, team spending limits in the Premier League? That's quite a detailed one. It's probably a full podcast. Salary caps are just on European law. I can't see it ever getting upheld unless the Premier League get ahead of the game now and start saying, look, you're never playing a Premier League footballer more than £1 million a week, and we're getting close to that day, right? We're definitely getting close to that day. It's probably a fair bet now that the first team to pay someone £1 million a week probably will be Newcastle United. But if you've got the money, you spend it, right? We know that teams generally will spend between 60-70% of their turnover on player salaries. So the more you're turning over, the more they're going to spend on salaries. It's just where it's at. Where's that going if it's not being spent on the players? Greedy owners, or you buy more players? The game just doesn't work like that, right? It's more for protection at lower levels where there's a full case for it. But they did try and implement it in League 1, League 2 a salary cap, and he got thrown out actually. Christian Pafor says Antonio to Hwang Hee Chan and Barnes to Lucas Moura captain versus Saudi Newcastle United. I'm going to skip your question, Christian. Shifo says, hi James, what do you think about the debate Owen and Ferdinand had about Mo or Suarez before the City game? Didn't hear it. I bet after Mo's performance Owen would wish to take back what he said. Probably not. Like, if you ask me who's... I haven't seen that debate. But if you ask me who's been the better player over the last 10 years or so, Luis Suarez. I wouldn't have a doubt about that. Now, in terms of if the debate was Liverpool legendary status, then that's a closer call. I think Salah's probably pushing ahead of him now. But in terms of the better player at their peak, Suarez, all day. Shifo says, sorry for asking 2 questions, but can you shout out a Twitter account that posts overall effective ownership percentages every game week, not just for the top 100k? I don't know it, mate. Sorry, I don't know it. I'm sure it's out there, but I don't know it. Yasin Ali says, hi James, I have Semedo and Saiss. No City or Chelsea defence. 1 free transfer used. Used wildcard. Should I roll the transfer? You want to keep these 2 Wolves players, I'm guessing? I mean, no City or Chelsea. I'd be looking to fix that personally. Border Gems, could it be that big name players don't want to play for an owner known for dismembering journalists and such? Yeah, it's possible. It's possible that some players may well feel like that, yeah. It's possible that players refuse to play for Barcelona or previously Qatar because they've had Qatari sponsorship on their shirts. That doesn't seem to have made a difference, does it? Reality, no. It probably won't matter. It'll probably matter who's got the biggest paycheck and what's the prospects of winning trophies at football club, unfortunately. James Beacock says, would you take a -4 to do Jota and Antonio out for KDB and Adam Armstrong or Tony? Have 2.9 million in the bank? No, I wouldn't, mate. And on Jota, just briefly, he's reported got a knock. Portugal have a game on Saturday. Portugal have a game on Tuesday. Wait till next Friday on the press conferences. A lot of the early price moves have happened. It's not to say there won't be any price changes between now and, say, next Thursday. I'm sure there will be. But there's not going to be many. Just wait till the internationals are finished. If Jota's fit, you've got Watford away. And I realise he's a doubt to start in any case. And Antonio, Everton away. Antonio's going nowhere for me. You want to get KDB in versus Burnley. You guarantee that KDB is going to play against Burnley. Not for me. Paul Lewis says, hi James. Hwang and Jimenez double up. Would be Antonio out for Hwang. Already have Lukaku. Can then go Jimenez up. Or down to Tony after the 9 swing. Hwang. Okay. So, Trincão's got COVID. We know this. Traore and Podence are also competing for the spot. There is no reason to believe that Hwang won't stay in the team for Wolves at Aston Villa. Can we take a step back and remember that he scored twice against Newcastle? Steve Bruce and Mike Ashley's Newcastle. And coming up is Villa away, Leeds away, Everton at home, Palace away, West Ham United at home. Now, they're all reasonable fixtures. Then it's Norwich Burnley. It's fine. Then there's a tough run. Obviously, when you buy this sort of player, you don't have to be locked into the long term. Of course you don't. It might be difficult to sell. You lose all your funds. What happens when he's shit? I'm just saying. I'm putting it out there. What happens if you get Hwang in and it proves to be that in 2-3 weeks he's lost his place in the squad and you've got no money in the bank? What are you doing? You're taking a -4, aren't you? Happy to do that? Okay. Fine. Chance it. I don't think it's a guarantee he stays in the team, personally. Literally none. And Hwang this week, read Trincão and Traore prior to game week 4. Now, Hwang looks like he can finish in front of goal, and he may prove a very good asset. And if he does, I'll go and get him. But it's not really in my thoughts at the moment, personally. Ironically, as I said on Monday's podcast, it might be that it works for me in the unusual situation that I'm going to assume that Rafinha is probably going to be unavailable in game week 8. I can go from Zakiri to Hwang in one move, and then it covers me. But then am I staying with 8 attacking players? No. I'll tell you exactly what I'd do with that. After that, I would sell Jota or Greenwood or Harvey Barnes down to the 4.5 million midfielder, and then in the following week, I'd move Hwang up. It would be so short term for me. I'm fairly certain of that. So it's a no. Selling Antonio, because he's got tough fixtures. Go and look at Antonio's record in tough fixtures. It doesn't matter for him. The only thing that matters with Antonio is he fit, isn't he fit, as far as I'm concerned. FPL Hitman says, hi James, hope you're good. Which double defence do you see scoring more? Chelsea, Rudiger and Alonso, or City, Diaz and Cancelo over the next 10 game weeks, given rotation is common for both? I will say the City pair. And that's probably because I think Cancelo will play a lot more than Alonso. Nicola, literally got to Nicola's question and it's been retracted. Bad Company says, hi James, how's the gym this week? Immense, mate. I met this guy down there, he was lovely. Chris Tellez says, hey James, not sure how much you've looked into it, but have you ever considered doing a special pod discussing the women's side of football and how it's growing a lot these last few years? We did discuss briefly feelings on women's football on a Tottenham podcast we did a couple of weeks ago, and I do intend to do so again. Yes, I'm sure it is something we will do at some point, Chris. Right, we'll end with the 2 last comments I can see on my screen, which are for AMAC and Murray McD. AMAC says, love listening to you, mate, top value. Also a fellow Spurs fan. Who is your favourite Spurs player in the last decade? Moussa Dembele for me. We never replaced him. Oh, wow, Moussa. I could go on for another half hour here, couldn't I? Everyone gets it now about Moussa, don't they? Or do they? Do people still not get it? Some people still don't get it. He's been so shit since he left. Favourite? He'd be right up there, AMAC. He would be right up there. But I think Kane would be above. And actually, Bale on 12-13 alone would be above, I think. But Moussa Dembele is an incredibly underrated footballer. And for those at Tottenham who still can't get that everything that was good was with him and everything that's been shit has been without him, then I think they need to get down to Specsavers. Murray MCD says, Harry Kane was against Hearts, yet Europa League playoff. Our goalkeeper saved a penalty in a 0-0. Down 5-0 from the first leg. My first European away day. True story, I'll end on this. I very nearly went to the first leg at Tynecastle. And I was going to get a sleeper train back overnight, and it just didn't work out in terms of taking time off work, and it still bugged me that I didn't go to that first leg, because obviously winning 5-0 would have been a good night. But yeah, we played a team full of kids in the second leg that include Ryan Fredericks, played right back actually for Tottenham, a few other names, including Kane, who took a penalty on debut. That's how young and inexperienced the team was. And he hit it straight down the middle and the keeper saved it. I'm glad I was right anyway, because that was bugging me. Thanks very much. Cheers, guys. If anybody I didn't get to your questions, much apologies. If you want to DM me with a screenshot of your team, or your question rather, please don't send me a screenshot of your team. A screenshot of your question, send it across on DM to Planet FPL Pod. I will have a look at it for you at some point over the weekend and come back to you. Next week's content, Monday, will be main podcast, and we are really going to open this up to a Q&A this week. So you can ask all your FPL questions that you want for Monday's podcast, and we'll probably cover as much as possible. Tuesday is highly likely to be an extended People's Poll podcast on the Newcastle United takeover. Wednesday will be Sky Fantasy Football. Thursday's Clash of the Correspondents will be Manchester City versus Burnley with FPL Pringle and Turfy Topper. And I can tell you the week after will be Crystal Palace versus Newcastle with McTavish and FPL Footballer. So you're going to get a bit of Newcastle for the next couple of weeks. Our opinion, then the fan opinion on COTC as well. Next week I'll be streaming. Most probably will return to a 3 p.m. Kickoff, I should imagine. Patron podcast next week will be Q&A on Monday. Tuesday, I haven't decided yet. Wednesday will be Tottenham. And one of the things we're going to discuss on there is Tottenham's refusal to meet the supporters trust. for a meeting with some concerns. We're going to be talking about that quite a bit. We'll look ahead to obviously the respective games at Everton and Newcastle. Thursday will be a quiz, which is being done by Steve Jones, one of the first to ask the question on the stream today. And next Friday will be our Game Week 9 differential preview show. If you would like to support our content, Patron is the best place to do it. There are over 20 additional podcasts in October from intermediate tier and advanced tier videos, of which there are over 20 in October as well, which included a very detailed look at how Manchester United are getting absolutely ruined on the counter-attack at the moment. That's all for now, guys. Enjoy your weekend, and for the benefit of those on the audio, cue music please, man, show.